Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Kraska, and the purpose of this YouTube video is to show you about a Harpers Ferry I built in 1859 and tell you about John Brown's raid on Harpers Ferry. This raid happened on October 16th, 1859 in Harpers Ferry, Virginia. John Brown had 21 men during the raid. John Brown's purpose for the raid was to start a revolution, and to start the revolution he needed weapons, and Harpers Ferry had the USA Armory in it. Before even starting the raid, some of John Brown's men took hostages. John Brown and his men came through a railroad bridge which I modeled. So they came through here. The railroad bridge happened to cut across the Shenandoah River. As they were turning the corner to the railroad bridge, Hayward Shepherd, a free black man who worked for the railroad company, saw them, and before he could say anything, got shot and killed. That sound awoke Dr. Starry, who looked at Hayward Shepherd, and unfortunately he couldn't do anything. So John Brown's men and John Brown told him to go back to his house and sleep. But then Dr. Starry came to warn the USA, which later messed up John Brown's raid completely. So here is a model of a B&Q railroad, which Hayward Shepherd worked at. I've got the dude who gives out tickets, and I've got a waiting area while you wait for other people to get tickets. Here is my model of the USA Armory, and they have a watchman posted on him. So as you obviously see, I used an iron golem and named him Watchman Will. John Brown wanted all these weapons: iron swords, guns, ammunition for the guns, the uniforms that the USA Army wears. He wanted all that. Unfortunately, all the racket John Brown was making started to rouse the townfolk, who rose into defense of their town, and they started fighting. John Brown was forced to go to an engine house, as you see obviously I have modeled. And while they were trying to enter the engine house, Dangerfield Newby, John Brown's oldest raider, was shot in the neck with an iron spike and later mutilated and fed to hogs. So John Brown and his men were stranded in the engine house, duking it out with angry citizens of Harpers Ferry and Harpers Ferry militia. The brick walls caused a lot of confusion, because if you missed, it would sound like it would ricochet off, and it was really crazy. 2 days later, the president at the time decided to send the USA Marines, which were the closest troops by, led by Robert E. Lee, later commander of the Confederate Army. They came on October 18th and they surrounded the engine house and they tried to negotiate with Brown, but Brown wouldn't let up. And and then they stormed the engine house and a bunch of people died. John Brown was captured and mortally wounded when he took a sword to the belt buckle. John Brown was captured, then he was took to Charlestown for his trial. John Brown was tried and sentenced to hanging. He died by hanging on December 2nd, 1859. So I am leaving the engine house to tour you the rest of my model of Harpers Ferry. This is a cathedral. A model of it at least. So you have the preacher and the quartz cross altar and the fire to burn any sacrifices. The reason I built this is because folks back then were extremely religious and worshipped God. So now it's time to take you to the stables, because back then, if you wanted to travel to some places, you might need a horse instead of a train. So then, I've got donkeys, some chests for the donkeys, horse armor for the horses, and some saddles. So I got a couple horses. And take turn. They would have had an inn, which I called the Harpers Ferry Inn, for travelers and people who liked beer, wanted a drink and partying. So here's the bartender. I made this entire first floor to a dining area. And here's the chef. So here's in a room that I did. You got a bed to sleep. You got a chest to store your stuff. You've got a furnace to keep you warm, and you got a cauldron for your bathroom, and you got a painting for art. I made all these rooms similar to the room that I just showed you. Now time to continue on with the tour. Now, they would have had a hardware store for tools. And you got the dude a cashier. Then you've got stone and iron tools. They would have used shovels to dig dirt. They would have had pickaxes to mine stone. They would have had axes to chop down trees. They would have had hoes to farm. Now continuing on with the tour. They would have had a butcher for fancy people who wanted good meats. So you got chicken, cooked pork chops, and cooked steak. And you got a cashier. This is a leather shop. They needed leather for a bunch of things back then, so they would have had a person who ran a leather shop, and this is the cashier. Then I've got a bunch of these houses I built for the civilians of Harpers Ferry. It's very similar to the inn's rooms, the Harpers Ferry inn rooms that I showed you. A bed to sleep, a chest for storage, a furnace for keeping you warm, and a cauldron for a bathroom. I made all these houses the same. And I put a welcome to Harpers Ferry sign. So, the reason I am showing this is to point out Kansas' importance in John Brown's raid. Kansas was the catalyst to John Brown's raid on Harpers Ferry, and John Brown was the catalyst for the Civil War. So, unintentionally, Kansas started the Civil War, which led to the end of slavery. So, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something about Harpers Ferry from it. Bye.